All right, students, so this is from chapter 2 in your textbook, and this is in reference to how the courts are divided. What is a court? Well, a court is the place and the people that handle the process of our justice system. The court encompasses, for the most part, a judge, a court reporter, a prosecutor, like myself. I represent the state of Texas. I make the accusation. I have the burden of proof to prove that the defendant committed a crime beyond a reasonable doubt. And the defense attorney who protects the defendant's constitutional rights and makes sure that he receives a fair trial and that all the rights in the United States Constitution are honored. So that is the court. The court means all of that process, all of those people involved in justice, in making sure justice is done. So there's many courts, and I'm going to explain to you how, what each court has and how we organize our courts in the American justice system. So let's start. First of all, there's two types of courts. States have their own courts, and the federal government have their own courts as well. And the reason for that is because each entity has different roles to play. As I told you before, the states are the ones that have the right to make and enforce criminal laws. But those criminal laws cannot contradict and cannot violate the rights of a citizen or of a person guaranteed to them in the United States Constitution. So as long as those criminal laws don't violate or contradict the U.S. Constitution, the states are the ones in charge of criminal laws, of making the laws, enforcing the laws, because like I told you, each state is like their own little country, their own little family. So we have two separate courts. In the state of Texas, how do we know which types of cases are going to be state of Texas, or should go to the courts in Texas, or should be handled by the federal government? I've already discussed this with you in a previous video, but I'll say it again. It depends on the type of case. For example, if it's a case that involves two states or two countries, interstate or international issues, then the federal government, the federal courts, are going to have jurisdiction. Jurisdiction means authority to handle a case. The power of a court to handle a case is called jurisdiction. So therefore, in federal jurisdiction, the federal government, for example, is going to have jurisdiction over cases involving immigration, illegal immigrants, illegal aliens that are undocumented, that come from another country into the United States. That's against the federal laws, and therefore federal courts are going to handle that. It involves two countries, it involves federal issues. Another example would be a case in which drugs are imported from another country into the United States. That's why the federal government most of their cases are immigration cases and drug cases, because that's where their jurisdiction comes from. They come from another country into this country, so therefore they get jurisdiction over drugs. Another example is weapons. ATF alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. They have jurisdiction. Federal court has jurisdiction. Why? Because most of those firearms, if not all of them, are imported from another state up north into Texas. There are, as far as I know, there are no factories that make weapons in Texas. They're imported from another state into Texas, and that's how the federal government gets jurisdiction to make laws and enforce criminal laws regarding weapons. Another example, of course, would be money. When we have fake money or people doing fraud in banks that are registered and they're regulated by the federal government, then the federal courts have jurisdiction. And another example that I gave you was the Dora Cisneros case, in which this lady hired 2 people from Mexico City to come to Brownsville, Rancho Viejo, Texas, to assassinate and kill the ex-boyfriend of her daughter. Dora Cisneros was first tried in the state of Texas because Texas had jurisdiction. It was a murder case that occurred in Texas, and Texas has jurisdiction. But through a problem or a technicality that happened, on appeal, the conviction was reversed, and Dora Cisneros was set free because double jeopardy attached, and the state of Texas could not indict her or prosecute her again for the same crime because of double jeopardy. Double jeopardy is a right given to all people through the Fifth Amendment that says that a person cannot be tried for the same offense twice in the same jurisdiction. However, since these are 2 different jurisdictions, the same case can be tried twice in separate jurisdictions in federal court. And that's what happened in the Dora Cisneros case. After the Court of Appeals reversed her conviction in the state of Texas because the jury instructions were incorrect, and the law required that would be done. What happened then, the federal government indicted her under federal law, and they were able to prove jurisdiction because of the fact that she had hired the 2 people that came from another country into the United States to commit this crime. And she was then convicted and is serving time in federal prison. So technically, even though it doesn't happen very often, there are cases that have overlapping jurisdictions, meaning the same case can be tried in several jurisdictions, and it's the same offense, same everything, but technically they can be tried in several jurisdictions if it involves several states or if it involves another country, and so forth, just like the Dora Cisneros example, which is a perfect example of how jurisdictions can overlap. All right, so now let's start with how the federal courts are organized. We start with the United States Supreme Court. That's the highest court in the land. And then we have the United States Court of Appeals, and then we have the United States District Court. I'm going to start from the bottom up so that you can understand the sequence of how a criminal case evolves, the journey of a criminal case. It starts with a district court. The United States District Court is the court of original jurisdiction in the federal court system. When I say it's the court of original jurisdiction, and I wrote it down here, court of original jurisdiction means that that's where the case begins. And when it's original jurisdiction, it means that the case is live. We have a judge, we have a prosecutor, we have a defense attorney, we have a jury, we have presentations of evidence where witnesses are going to come in and testify live, and the jury gets to see them, and the jury gets to see their demeanor, they get to see how they act, they get to judge whether they're telling the truth or not telling the truth. And there's a court reporter that is transcribing everything that is being said, so that a transcript of everything that was said is recorded and documented. And all the evidence is presented, and the court reporter is the one that has all that evidence, is in charge of keeping and preserving all that evidence for future purposes, like for appeal. So that court is called the United States District Court. Now, as you know, our country is very big. We have many states, and so the federal government is a big, big court. So they divided as best as they can through divisions and through states. I'm not going to get too much into detail with that, but I'd like for you to know that there is a division called the Southern District of Texas. The Southern District of Texas encompasses several cities in Texas. It encompasses Brownsville. We belong to the Southern District of Texas for district courts. It encompasses McAllen. It encompasses, Edinburgh, the McAllen, Edinburgh area. It encompasses Laredo. It encompasses Houston. It encompasses Victoria and Brownsville, Edinburgh, Corpus Christi, Houston. Did I say Houston already? Those cities are part of the Southern District of Texas. That's one court that we have. There's other divisions that we are not, that we don't belong to. And the reason why they divide it like that is for purposes of courts, you know, instead of having one court in Brownsville and we're called, but that court is also subdivided into divisions, so that we have a district court called Southern District of Texas, and then that also is divided into divisions. We have the Brownsville division, the McAllen division, the Corpus Christi division, and so forth and so forth. But we have a federal court, and if you want to know where it is, it's right by the zoo on Harrison Street, on 6th Street and Harrison. Right across the zoo, there's a beautiful building, and that building is called Filemon Vela, and the Filemon Vela and building, and that's what that's where our federal court is at. So when if the defendant believes that the district court, the court of original jurisdiction, mishandled his or her case, if the defendant believes that the court of original jurisdiction made a mistake in and contradicted the, some rights guaranteed to him by the United States Constitution, he can appeal. What does appeal mean? Appeal means to ask for somebody to review what the lower court did to make sure that nothing was done incorrectly. So an appeal, and here's a red out, I'm going to write here, appeal. A decision made by the U.S. District Court may be appealed to the United States Court of Appeals. And the same thing over here, the United States Court of Appeals has multiple courts, all under the umbrella of United States Court of Appeals. That umbrella, there's all these different courts of appeals, each court is called circuit courts, and there's 12 of them. And Texas belongs to the 5th Circuit. And it's important for you to know that Texas belongs to the 5th Circuit. Why is that important? Well, because if you see a case that says 5th Circuit, that's us. That's us. We have to follow that law. We have to follow what the 5th Circuit says, because many times that decision is the highest court in the land, and for us, the reason is sometimes there is no Supreme Court case on point because the Supreme Court hasn't ruled on that particular law or those facts of the case. And so the highest law that we have is the 5th Circuit. So it's important to know the 5th Circuit unless there is a Supreme Court case that talks about that same issue or that same law. And if somebody gets a decision by the 5th Circuit and they don't like it, and they think that the 5th Circuit is wrong, they can appeal to the Supreme Court, to the United States Supreme Court. Over here, they can appeal to the Supreme Court, but they have to do it with a procedure called a writ of certiorari. I wrote it right here. Writ of certiorari. A writ of certiorari is basically a petition to the United States Supreme Court to review what the lower court did and make sure that the lower court did not make a mistake, did not do something incorrectly. If the Supreme Court grants the writ of certiorari, that doesn't mean that the person that appealed won the case. No. All it means is that the Supreme Court says, yes, I'm going to review. I may not agree with what you're saying, but I'm going to look into it. And if they deny the writ of certiorari, that means that what the 5th Circuit said is the law for now, until the Supreme Court maybe later decides to change its mind. So therefore, that's why it's important to know what the 5th Circuit says. So if the writ of certiorari is granted, then the U.S. Supreme Court will review the case and will decide whether the lower court did something correct or did not. If the Supreme Court says that the 5th Circuit did everything correct, they're going to affirm the lower court decision. But if they think that, no, the lower court is wrong, then they will reverse what the lower court did. And if they say, well, we're going to reverse, but I think that they can reverse, but I think that they can fix the mistake, then they're going to reverse and remand. Reverse and remand. I'm just going to put here remand. that means we're going to reverse what you did and we're going to send it back to you so that you can fix the problem, if it is fixable. Or they can reverse and acquit, which is what they did. Well, not them, over here. You know, similar to what happened in the Dora Cisneros case. Reverse and acquit. If they acquit, that means they're found not guilty. And double jeopardy attaches. And they cannot try the case again. And the Supreme Court, there is no appeal. There's nothing higher than that. If they don't like the result, too bad, so sad. There is no higher court than the United States Supreme Court. Okay, so let's start over here with Texas. And let me explain that to you. This, by the way, is explained to you in your textbook. But this that I'm going to teach right now is not. And this is part of your quiz, so pay attention. In the state of Texas, I'm going to start from the bottom. We first have the Justice of the Peace Courts and the municipal courts. By the way, there is a handout that I gave to you. Please read it carefully. It basically summarizes what I am going to explain here. And I'm teaching out of my house, so if you hear noises, I'm sorry. So anyway, the Justice of the Peace Courts, those are courts that handle Class C misdemeanors. A Class C misdemeanor is a semi-criminal case where there might be a fine only, and if you don't pay a fine, it might be 3 days in jail. But the Justice of the Peace is a judge that is elected by the people, and it handles those types of cases. Class C misdemeanors, basically your speeding tickets and your traffic offenses, that type of deal. Now, the important thing that you need to remember about Justice of the Peace Courts is that it is a court of no record. No record. What does that mean? There's no court reporter doing anything. There's no court reporter. Everything is live. There are witnesses, there's jury trials, everything that I explained over there, but there's no court reporter. Oh, by the way, over here, on these courts of appeal, those courts, there's no live witnesses, there's all the Court of Appeals, they don't hear about witnesses, they do hear closing arguments and stuff by some of the lawyers, but for the most part, they rely on the record only, on the transcript, on what the court reporter wrote down. So if it's not on the record, if the court reporter didn't write it down, it doesn't exist. The Court of Appeals, even the Supreme Court, they don't have any witnesses, they don't hear, no live witnesses, nothing like that. All of that happens only in the court of original jurisdiction. So therefore, they rely on the transcript. That's why it's so important for the court reporter to write and record everything. Because if they don't do it, the Court of Appeals says it did not happen. So therefore, Justice of the Peace Courts, they're courts of original jurisdiction, meaning everything is live, you're going to have witnesses, you're going to have parties coming live to testify and all that drama. But there's no record, no court report. Municipal courts, they also handle Class C misdemeanors, but they're not a court of record either. Justice of the Peace Courts usually have jurisdiction in, like for example, municipal courts, they're city courts, they have jurisdiction for their own city. Like for example, Brownsville has a municipal court, but somebody, from municipal court in Brownsville does not have jurisdiction to hear a case in McAllen, You know, they only have jurisdiction over the city of Brownsville. And justice of the peace courts, they have jurisdiction to hear cases in those particular little small rural areas or in between cities where there's no municipal court, and so they handle that. So for the most part, like for example in Brownsville, municipal court handle, you know, Brownsville Police Department is the one that they turn in their cases to the municipal judge, and JP courts, DPS and the sheriff's office, they take their cases to the JP courts. Municipal courts also have no record. That's important, because if you want to appeal a decision made by the justice of the peace courts and municipal courts, your only recourse is to appeal to county court at law, to this one. And this one, county court at law, is also a court of original jurisdiction where everything's live. They don't read transcripts. It's not a court of appeal court. So therefore, it's a trial de novo. I wrote it down here, trial de novo. Meaning the whole drama has to be done again. The witnesses, the prosecutor or the parties, they have to come to court, they all have to testify live. But this time, there is a court reporter, because county courts at law are courts of record, meaning there is a court reporter. And all of these are courts of original jurisdiction. I wrote it here. All of these courts are courts of original jurisdiction. State district courts, they handle felony cases. Those are cases that are punishable in prison for more than 1 year and up to 99 years or life, and maybe even the death penalty. County courts at law are courts of original jurisdiction, and they handle cases, they handle misdemeanors. They handle Class A and Class B misdemeanors, which are punishable up to 1 year in jail, in county jail. Then we have, now, if a decision made by state district court or by county court at law is no good, if for some reason the defendant doesn't think that they did a good job, that they made a mistake or something, then they can appeal to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. And again, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals is divided into many courts, and Brownsville belongs to the 13th Court of Appeals in Corpus Christi. And if the defendant still doesn't like the decision made by the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, they can appeal to, it depends. Pay attention to this. If it's a criminal case, they appeal to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. And if it's a civil case, they appeal to the Texas Supreme Court. So in the state of Texas, for criminal cases, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals is the highest court for criminal cases. I'll repeat. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals is the highest court. It's not the Texas Supreme Court, because the Texas Supreme Court only hears civil cases, not criminal cases. Now, if the defendant still thinks that he was wrong, that the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals did something wrong, he has one more chance. He can appeal to the United States Supreme Court. But what does he have to do? A writ of certiorari. And the U.S. Supreme Court, it's their discretion. They can either grant it or not grant it. It's up to them whatever they want to do. And if they grant the writ of certiorari, that doesn't mean the defendant wins. It just means that he's given a chance, that they're going to review the case. Thank you. I hope this helps. Take the quiz.